He escaped the most brutal prison. But at what cost? The air in Blackwater Penitentiary tasted of rust and despair. Every breath was a grim reminder of the iron bars, the concrete walls, and the endless, crushing routine that stole not just your freedom, but your very soul. For Elias Thorne, inmate 734, every tick of the clock was a step closer to madness, or a step towards an impossible dream: escape. This wasn't just any prison. Blackwater was a fortress, built to break spirits, not allow exits. Yet Elias, a man wrongly accused, held on to a burning truth. He would rather die trying than rot here. His journey out began not with a pickaxe or a smuggled key, but with a series of seemingly innocuous smudges on the floor of the prison laundry room. Most inmates saw dirt. Elias saw a map. He had a photographic memory, a curse and a blessing. Weeks he spent observing the patterns left by leaky pipes, spilled bleach, and the dragged feet of weary guards. Each stain a segment of a blueprint, each scuff a hidden passage. This wasn't a conventional map. 'Twas an invisible blueprint of freedom, etched by the prison itself. How could he use a map that only existed in his mind, in a place where even thinking too loud earned you a beating? This was his first silent defiance. Phase 1. The Blueprint of Despair. Understanding Blackwater. To escape Blackwater, one had to understand Blackwater. It wasn't just walls. It was a living, breathing entity designed to contain. Elias spent his initial months not on escape, but on observation and data collection. This was the unglamorous, painstaking tutorial phase. Step 1. Routine mapping. Guard shifts and habits. Every guard had a tell. Guard Jenkins always checked cell block D first, then lingered by the water cooler. Guard Miller hummed a particular tune when he was nearing the end of his shift, signaling a slight relaxation in his vigilance. Elias used his meal times, yard time, and even the moments lying awake in his bunk to mentally log these patterns. He wasn't looking at the guards. He was looking through them, observing their paths, their blind spots, their moments of distraction. Technique: subtly tracked footsteps. Listen to distant conversations. Notice the flickering of lights as someone passed a sensor. Elias learned to count footsteps to estimate distances in the dark. Inmate movements. The flow of inmates to the mess hall, library, or workshops was a controlled chaos. Elias observed which areas became congested, creating cover, and which pathways were usually clear. He noticed how prisoners formed cliques and their unspoken territories. Facility layout. Since he couldn't draw, he used his other senses. Sound. The distinct squeak of a specific cell door hinge, the hum of the ventilation system in different sections, the distant clanging of pipes indicating the boiler room. These sounds became his mental compass. Smell. The antiseptic smell of the infirmary, the stale sweat in the gym, the metallic temps near the old water pipes. Each scent a location marker. Temperature. Cooler drafts from ventilation shafts, warmer spots near heating ducts or electrical conduits. These indicated potential access points. Step 2. Identifying weak points. Structural integrity. Blackwater was old, built on a swampy foundation. Elias noticed hairline cracks in the cafeteria wall, persistent damp spots in the laundry room, and areas where mortars was crumbling. These weren't weaknesses for a direct breach, but indicators of stress points, places where a minor disturbance could escalate. Method. During his mandatory cleaning duties, he would lightly tap walls, listen to the echo, and feel for vibrations. He learned to distinguish between solid concrete and hollow spaces. Security lapses. No system was perfect. He noted the infrequent patrols in certain corridors during specific hours. The occasional unattended supply carts left in hallways, or the moments when a camera briefly malfunctioned. These were fleeting windows of opportunity, not direct paths. Resource assessment. What could he use? Metal, discarded cutlery, loose screws from furniture, forgotten tools in the workshop. Each item was mentally cataloged for its potential use: a makeshift pry bar, a wire for picking, a shiv for defense, cloth rope, torn uniforms, old cleaning rags. These could be fashioned into crude ropes, gags, or padding. Chemicals, cleaning supplies from the laundry room, bleach, detergents. Could they be used for distraction, corrosion, or creating a makeshift smokescreen? Information, gossip among guards, whispers between inmates. Even seemingly trivial information could reveal a hidden passage or a temporary blind spot. Elias became an expert listener. Elias knew he couldn't act alone, but direct communication was suicide. He needed an ally, someone who wouldn't betray him, someone who also yearned for freedom beyond all else. He found his potential ally in the library, an old, frail man named Silas, who spent his days meticulously repairing torn books. Silas had been in Blackwater longer than anyone remembered, an expert in blending into the shadows. Elias started leaving subtle, coded messages in the torn pages of specific books. A dog-eared corner on a certain page, a barely visible scratch under a specific word. It was a language only a fellow prisoner, desperate enough to pay attention to the minutiae of despair, could understand. Silas, with his quiet observations, was perfect. But could Silas be trusted with a plan that meant certain death if it failed? And what impossible demand would Silas make in return for his silence, his knowledge, and his help? Phase 2. The Ally and the Catalyst. Initiating the plan. Elias understood that an escape wasn't a sudden burst of action, but a meticulously choreographed sequence of events, each step reliant on the last. Step 3. Gaining an ally's trust. Patience and observation. Elias didn't approach Silas directly. Instead, he observed Silas for weeks, noting his habits, his solitary nature, and his aversion to guards. He saw the subtle glint in Silas's eyes when a particularly poignant passage about freedom was read aloud during library hour. The coded exchange. Elias began by leaving subtle marks in books Silas frequented. A specific book on architecture might have a page dog-eared, pointing to a diagram of ventilation systems. A book on ancient escapes might have a word underlined, a subtle hint at a specific method. Elias's first message. In a history book, he gently scratched a tiny X next to a passage about a forgotten sewer system beneath an old city. He then left the book on Silas's usual table in the library. Silas's response. A week later, Elias found the same book, now with a faint, almost imperceptible smudge of graphite next to a different passage, one describing the unseen tunnels used by a resistance movement. It was a silent acknowledgement. Building the language. Over months, their coded communication evolved. They used specific shelf numbers, page numbers, and even the condition of the books themselves to convey information. A crumpled page meant danger. A neatly folded one meant opportunity. This slow, painstaking exchange built a bond of trust without a single spoken word. Step 4. The Catalyst. Creating a distraction. Identifying the weakest link. Elias knew a direct breach was impossible. He needed a diversion, something significant enough to draw away attention from his chosen escape route, but not so large that it would trigger an immediate lockdown of the entire facility. The kitchen, with its volatile mix of heat, grease, and disgruntled inmates, was the perfect candidate. The plan controlled chaos. The goal was not a riot, but a controlled, chaotic incident that would force a partial lockdown and redeploy guards. Elias focused on the ventilation system in the kitchen. Execution. Over weeks, Elias, working in the kitchen for his chores, would subtly loosen a specific vent cover near the main exhaust fan. He would use a sharpened piece of a discarded spoon, painstakingly grinding away at the screws during moments when no one was looking. The spark. The key was a volatile mix of cooking oil and a discarded electrical wire. During a particularly busy dinner service, Elias would subtly spill a small amount of oil near the faulty wire in a hidden corner, ensuring it would eventually heat up and cause a localized but visually alarming smoke incident. He wouldn't ignite a fire, just create enough smoke and the smell of burning plastic to trigger an alarm and draw guards. The kitchen diversion was set. The coded messages with Silas indicated that the old man had identified a rarely used, partially collapsed section of the old sewage system, directly beneath the prison's disused boiler room. This was their path. Everything hinged on the smoke creating enough confusion for Elias to slip into the boiler room, and for Silas to have created a crucial diversion inside. But just hours before the planned event, a new, extremely vigilant guard, known only as the Hawk for his piercing gaze and uncanny ability to spot trouble, was assigned to Elias's block. The Hawk rarely blinked. He never missed a detail. How could Elias execute a plan relying on unseen movements when every shadow was now under the scrutinizing eye of the prison's most observant warden? The cost of freedom was already rising, and the escape hadn't even truly begun.